All right, Stallions, let me go ahead and go over our notebook for our second unit. So we are in the Revolutionary Era, and we're going to go ahead and go over this digital notebook. So similar to the very first notebook that we did, this is the second one. So we do have an overview, which is a timeline. So we're talking about the Revolutionary Era. This is when the colonists are going to go ahead and rise up to the tyrant, which is King George III, and fight for independence. And just like every other war, it does not happen overnight. There's actually different events that lead to the colonists wanting to rebel and to fight for independence. So it all starts off in 1603. This is the turning point of the relationship between the colonists and the king. So after the French and Indian War, they were fighting the British and the king, led by the king, King George III, were fighting the French and with their allies, the Native Americans, because they wanted a specific region, which was the Ohio River Valley. So they fought the Ohio River Valley, and then that led to the proclamation, and then that led to different taxes to go ahead and create revenue to go ahead and help the king and his dead in the war. And then you had the Boston Massacre, followed by the Boston Tea Party, and then Revolution is coming because you have Lexington and Concord, and then we declare independence. Saratoga happens next, which is the turning point of the war. Then Yorktown, which is the last battle, and then finally, but not least, is the Treaty of Paris. So let's go ahead and see how that timeline played out. So, as I mentioned before, the French and Indian War, this is where we're going to start to have the turning point with the relationship between the colonists and the king and Britain. So, the whole reason why we went to war is because the colonists wanted to move to the Ohio River Valley. This region had an abundance of resources and more land in general. So, the colonists wanted to go ahead and expand west of the Appalachians. But the issue was the French already had claim to this land, and they also had some allies, which are the Native Americans, which did not like the colonists. After the French and Indian War, also known as the Seven Years' War, we have two effects. England or Britain and the king and the colonists were going to or won the war. So after the war, wars cost a lot of money. So the king and England go into debt. They need to go ahead and create revenue. So they're going to go ahead and Parliament and the king are going to pass a bunch of taxes onto the colonists to go ahead and create revenue and to gain back money from the war. The second effect is that the Native Americans still do not like the colonists and they still occupy that region west of the Appalachian. So, to prevent conflict with the Native Americans, which would lead to more debt because the king would have to protect the colonists, he goes ahead and issues this new law, which is called the Proclamation of 1763. This proclamation prevents colonists from moving west of the Appalachians. So, again, they won the war. They have the Ohio River Valley region, but this proclamation line is preventing them from moving west of the Appalachian Mountains. As I mentioned, the king and England are in debt, so therefore they need to create some revenue to go ahead and climb out of this debt that was caused after the French and Indian War. So they're going to go ahead and pass a several taxes that are going to create revenue for them. So the first tax that Parliament is going to pass is the Stamp Act. So the Stamp Act is a tax on all paper goods, including stamps. So the issue is not necessarily the tax itself, but it's the issue that the colonists feel that they do not have representation in Parliament. So, therefore, the colonists are starting to boycott some English goods because of the lack of representation. So, this is where the phrase comes no taxation without representation. The next act is the Quartering Act. The Quartering Act requires colonists to house and feed British soldiers. To make sure that the colonists are in line, the King George keeps sending more redcoats, which are also English soldiers, to the colonies. So the Quartering Act requires that the colonists have to house and feed these soldiers. So again, the colonists react. Many of them start to protest in large demonstrations. They do not like this. If this is like they're infringing, England is infringing on their rights. The next act is the tea act, which is simply a duty on tea. This also gives monopoly to specific English tea carriers. So the colonists, again, they feel that their rights are being infringed upon and they are no longer able to smuggle, and they have harsh penalties, which they're going to get trialed in England, not even in the colonies. So the Sons of Liberty, led by Samuel Adams, are going to go ahead and lead a organized civil disobedience in the Boston Harbor, which is going to be known as the Boston Tea Party. The king does not like this. He realizes that the colonists are acting erratic and they are damaging his goods. So he's going to go ahead and punish them by passing the Intolerable Acts, also known as the Coercive Acts. So the king is going to end up closing the Boston Harbor and shut down all colonial governments, including, and then he's also going to go ahead and place all these taxes, all these acts back on the colonists. So the colonists, this is the last final straw that they have with the king. They're going to go ahead and meet together. They're going to send representatives to meet in the First Continental Congress. At this meeting, the colonists decide to end all trade with England and vow that if one colony gets attacked, all the colonies will defend. So this is them coming together and standing their ground. Join or die. So just looking back at the Boston Tea Party, this is an example of civil disobedience. Nobody was hurt, but a lot of property and laws were not followed, so therefore this was civil disobedience. The reason why the Boston Tea Party took place was because the colonists were rebelling against the Tea Act. So therefore, the Sons of Liberty, led by Samuel Adams, went ahead and organized this protest, dressed up as Native Americans, and tossed a bunch of tea into the Boston Harbor. Again, the effects was the Intolerable Acts. The king was very highly upset, so he went ahead and closed the Boston Harbor and also closed all colonial government. And additional to this, he's going to send a lot more British troops to make sure that the colonists are staying in line. The Boston Massacre was an event that led to propaganda. So propaganda again is being or having an event that's being portrayed only in one light, so it's biased. So this event is where 5 colonists were killed by some Boston Redcoats, and because they were protesting English taxes. So although only 5 people perished, the Paul Revere is going to go ahead and create the Bloody Massacre, which is on the left. This is a sign of propaganda, and this is going to start to encourage the colonists moving towards independence. So again, this is a example of propaganda. So it is official. The Declaration of Independence is the glorified breakup letter between the colonists and the King of England. So the colonists are going to go ahead and write the Declaration of Independence, which consists of 3 parts. The preambles, which include unalienable rights, which say that all humans are born with these natural rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of property or happiness in general. And it just shows how a human should be treated. So therefore, the second part is grievances. The colonists are going to list all of their complaints, which are also known as grievances, about how the king has mistreated them. So these are a list of grievances, one of them being that he's passing taxes without their consent. Additional to that, he's also preventing them from moving, so prevents the population of these states, which is the proclamation. He also holds trials for these colonists in England. So again, he controls the judges, and he is also cutting off trade, which is the Navigation Acts. And additional to that, he's also making us house soldiers without our consent, which is the Quartering Act. The last part of the Declaration of Independence is us just declaring officially our independence from England. So the Revolutionary era has a good amount of significant individuals that play a role in our independence. So John Adams is the first one. He's going to be known in many different ways, but the main thing at this point, he's just a patriot and he's part of the Continental Congress. He's also going to become the second president of the United States. His son, Samuel Adams, is the leader of the Sons of Liberty. They are a radical patriot group, and they also are well known for organizing the Boston Tea Party, which Samuel Adams was the leader of. Crispus Attucks got attacked at the Boston Massacre. If you look at his last name, Attucks, it looks like attack. So again, Boston Attucks was the first casualty. He was known as a martyr at the Boston Massacre. Mr. Benjamin Franklin, he was an advocate for colonial unity during the French and Indian War. That's where he created his political cartoon, which is Join and Die. He also was on the committee that helped write the Declaration of Independence, and he helped negotiate the Treaty of Paris. Marquis de Lafayette, if you see the last name, Lafayette, that's the only French individual that we're going to need to know. He is an ally for the colonial group, the Patriots, which are the Americans, and he's going to help support America in their fight for independence. KG3, King George III, he is the King of England. He's acting like a tyrant. He's the one that's helping pass all these taxes. Patrick Henry, Mr. Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death. He's most known for that speech. He is a patriot fighting for independence. He is very vocal about his opinions. So again, Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death is made by Patrick Henry, a patriot. T.J. Thomas Jefferson, he is the author of the Declaration of Independence. He is also going to become later the leader of the Democratic Republicans and future president as well, that buys the Louisiana Purchase. But what we need to know, Thomas Jefferson, he is the writer of the Declaration of Independence. Mr. T. Paine, Thomas Paine himself, he is the writer or author of Common Sense, which influenced a lot of Americans, convincing them to join the fight towards independence. So T. Paine wrote Common Sense, Thomas Paine. Last but not least is our future first president, George Washington. George Washington, before he becomes president, he's most known because he's the leader of the Continental Army during the American Revolution. So he's going to be the leader behind our army. So the battles, as soon as we declare our independence, we do have some battles that we must know that are very significant. Lexington and Concord is the very first battle of the Revolution. This is also known as Shot Her Around the World because this officially starts the war between America or American colonies and England. Saratoga is known as the turning point. It convinced the French to join. Saratoga, the France actually saw that the American colonists had a winning chance, so they're going to go ahead and become allies with us. So this is our first foreign ally moving forward. Valley Forge was a time of hardship. This is where the King George and his men, the Continental Army, they spent the winter there, and things got rough, but the Americans survived and came back out stronger. So again, during this time of hardship, they were on the verge of failing and quitting, but this just showed that the American spirit, we were able to persevere. Yorktown. This is officially the last war of the Revolution. The English surrendered, therefore American wins the war. Just like every war, it is not officially over until you have it in writing in a form of a treaty. So the Treaty of Paris of 1783, England finally recognizes America as its own country, and we get all the land east of the Mississippi River. We have a bunch of vocab terms. I'll go ahead and let you read all those. Era, proclamation, tyranny, acts, propaganda, revolution, patriots, loyalists / Tories. Unalienable rights, civil disobedience. Additional to that, there are resources. Please take the time to take these resources. This is what's going to help you be successful on your tests. Practice makes perfect. All right, guys. Hopefully you reviewed this entire video. If you please feel free to rewind if you need to go over some certain parts. If you have any questions, please email your teachers. Hope y'all have a great day. Bye.